Manhattan, New York. Sophia Reed was having the worst day of her professional life when she received the phone call that would change everything. Miss Reed. The voice was crisp, professional, with a hint of Boston sophistication. This is Margaret Sterling, personal assistant to Mr. Alexander Sterling. I'm calling to confirm your attendance at tonight's charity gala. Sophia paused mid-stride on the busy sidewalk of Fifth Avenue, nearly dropping the stack of rejection letters she was carrying along with her third cup of coffee that day. I'm sorry. I think there's been some mistake. Oh, wonderful. I'm so glad I reached you. Mr. Sterling is quite eager to meet you. Your table is reserved for 8-0, and as we discussed, you'll be seated as his special companion for the evening. The media will be there. So, wait, media? Sophia nearly shouted, causing a businessman in an expensive suit to give her a wide berth. I think you've called the wrong person. I'm Sophia Reed, freelance journalist, currently unemployed, and I have no idea who you think I am. Perfect. That matches exactly. Sophia Reed, 28, Columbia journalism graduate, speaks 3 languages fluently. The information is all correct. Sophia stopped walking completely. How did this woman know these details about her? Mr. Sterling will compensate you $50,000 for tonight's appearance, Margaret continued casually, as if discussing the weather. Half deposited now, half after the event. Oh, and we've sent an appropriate dress to your apartment. It should arrive within the hour. $50,000. Sophia looked at her phone's banking app. $247.83. 2 months behind on rent, empty refrigerator, student loan payments past due. What exactly would I have to do? Simply be his date for the evening. Smile. Be charming. I'm sure that will come naturally. Mr. Sterling needs a convincing girlfriend for a few hours. Business reasons, you understand. Sophia didn't understand, but $50,000 spoke louder than her confusion. And if I agree, that means you'll receive $25,000 immediately. I can transfer it while we speak. Sophia's phone buzzed. Banking notification. Deposit received. $25,000. She stared at the screen, blinked several times, looked again. The number was still there. So Margaret said smoothly, "Shall we say 8-0? 4 hours later, Sophia stood in front of her bathroom mirror wearing a dress that cost more than her monthly rent. It was midnight blue, elegant, but not ostentatious, and fit her curves as if it had been custom-made, which she suspected it probably had been. The doorbell rang. Sophia opened it to find a uniformed driver. "Miss Reed, I'm here to escort you to the plaza." The car, a sleek black Mercedes, felt like stepping into another world. Sophia settled into the leather seats, trying not to look too impressed, and checked her phone again. $25,000, real money, in her actual account. When they arrived at the Plaza Hotel, Sophia understood why they needed a fake girlfriend. The ballroom was filled with at least 300 elegantly dressed people, half of them clearly New York elite, the other half apparently international dignitaries. Camera flashes popped constantly throughout the room. There, Margaret appeared beside her as if materialized from thin air. She was a woman in her 40s, impeccably dressed, who surveyed Sophia with professional approval. "You look perfect. I still don't know anything about him. What if I can't pull this off?" "You'll be fine." Margaret's smile was confident. "You've been dating Alexander for 2 months. You met at a book launch in Soho. You're passionate about investigative journalism and social justice. He knows you speak Spanish and French, so feel free to impress. Oh, and call each other darling or sweetheart. But don't overdo it. Wait, I haven't even seen what he looks like. What if I don't recognize? You will." Margaret nodded toward the center of the room. "Trust me." Sophia followed her gaze and immediately understood what Margaret meant. Alexander Sterling was tall, easily 6'2", with dark hair that looked like he'd run his fingers through it, broad shoulders that filled out his tuxedo perfectly, and an easy smile that seemed genuine even in this obviously artificial environment. But it was his eyes that caught her attention. Deep green, intelligent, and when they met hers across the crowded room, there was something there that made her forget to breathe for a moment. "Go." Margaret gave her a gentle push. "He's waiting." Sophia made her way through the crowd, her heart hammering. When she was just a few feet away, Alexander turned fully toward her, and that smile became even more devastating. Sophia. His voice was deep, warm, with just a hint of a California accent that somehow made her name sound like music. You look absolutely stunning. For a second, she forgot this was all fake. The way he said it, the way his eyes lit up when he saw her, it felt completely real. Thank you, darling. The endearment came out more naturally than she'd expected. Alexander offered his arm, and when she took it, he leaned down to murmur in her ear, "Thank you for doing this. I know it must seem completely insane." A little, she whispered back, smiling for the cameras that had already turned their attention to them. "But the money helps with the insanity." He laughed, a genuine laugh that sent a flutter through her stomach. "Good to know you're here purely for mercenary reasons. Makes things less complicated." Somehow Sophia wasn't sure that was true. The evening was surreal. Alexander was the perfect escort, attentive, funny, including her in every conversation. When a tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley started speaking in rapid-fire industry jargon, Alexander said casually, "Sophia's got a better grasp of the tech world than I do." She wrote an expose on data privacy that got picked up by the Times. That was actually true. It had been one of her last published pieces before the freelance work dried up. But the look of genuine pride on Alexander's face when he said it made her chest tighten unexpectedly. "Impressive," the entrepreneur said, and suddenly Sophia found herself in an animated discussion about corporate accountability while Alexander watched with what looked like real admiration. "You didn't tell me you were brilliant," he said quietly when the tech guy moved on. "You didn't ask," Sophia replied, taking a sip of champagne that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. "What else didn't Margaret tell you about me?" "Apparently, everything important." Alexander studied her with curiosity, like the fact that you're going to be impossible to forget. The words hung between them, charged with something that definitely wasn't in their arrangement. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of conversations, photographs, and a growing awareness that Alexander Sterling wasn't what she'd expected from a billionaire who needed to hire a fake girlfriend. He was sharp, had a wicked sense of humor, and treated everyone from the wait staff to fellow billionaires with the same easy respect. More troubling, he seemed genuinely interested in what she had to say. Not just polite fake boyfriend interest, but real engagement with her thoughts on journalism, politics, social issues. When it came time to leave, Sophia realized she didn't want the night to end. "Thank you," Alexander said as they reached the hotel's entrance. "You were perfect. Better than perfect." "It was actually fun." Sophia hesitated. "Alexander, can I ask you something? Why did you need a fake girlfriend?" He looked at her for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. "My family thinks I should be married by now, especially my grandmother who controls the majority stake in our company." He ran a hand through his hair, messing it up in a way that shouldn't have been attractive, but absolutely was. "Tonight was crucial for some international partnerships, and she made it clear that if I showed up alone again, there would be consequences. So you hired a girlfriend?" "Margaret hired one. I didn't even know your name until this afternoon." He paused. "Actually, how did Margaret get your information?" "She was pretty vague when I asked." A strange feeling crept up Sophia's spine. "I don't know. I assumed you knew." They looked at each other and Sophia had the uncomfortable sensation that there was something important they were both missing. "The car will take you home," Alexander said finally. "And Sophia, if you'd like, maybe we could have dinner again. No cameras, no contract, just because." Sophia's heart skipped. "I'd like that." His smile was the same one that had made her forget this was an act. "Then it's a date." When Sophia got home an hour later, she checked her phone and saw that the remaining payment had been transferred. $50,000. Enough to solve all her immediate problems and then some. But as she got ready for bed, Sophia realized she wasn't thinking about the money. She was thinking about deep green eyes and the way Alexander had said her name. She was thinking about his genuine laugh and how he'd treated everyone at the gala with such natural respect. She was thinking about how for a few hours pretending to be Alexander Sterling's girlfriend had felt like the most natural thing in the world. Her phone buzzed. Text from an unknown number. "Had an amazing time tonight. Coffee tomorrow, Alexander." Sophia smiled at her phone. Maybe Margaret Sterling had made the perfect mistake. But as she drifted off to sleep, a nagging thought lingered. How exactly had Margaret gotten her personal information so easily? And why had she chosen Sophia specifically out of all the women in New York City? 3 days later, Manhattan Sophia was still floating on cloud nine when her best friend Maya burst into her apartment without knocking, carrying 2 iced coffees and wearing her signature "I need all the details" expression. "Okay, spill everything. And I mean everything." Maya dropped onto the couch that Sophia could now actually afford to replace. "You disappear for a night, come back with designer clothes and this mysterious glow, pay 3 months of rent and cash and think I won't notice." Sophia tried to look innocent. "I got a freelance assignment. A freelance assignment that pays $50,000 for one night." "What did you write?" "The secret formula for eternal youth." Maya raised an eyebrow. "And don't think I didn't see you Googling Alexander Sterling for 2 hours yesterday." "Busted." Sophia sighed and told Maya everything. The mysterious phone call, the confusion about her identity, the fake girlfriend setup, and most importantly, how Alexander had asked her out for real. "Wait, hold up." Maya held up a hand. "You're telling me that some random assistant called you by mistake? You went along with being a fake girlfriend, and now you're actually falling for the guy?" "I'm not falling for him," Sophia protested weakly. "We just connected. Connected while you were literally being paid to fake a connection. But it didn't feel fake," Sophia insisted. "Maya, you should have seen how he treated everyone. The way he talked about his work, his values. He's not what I expected from a billionaire playboy." Maya studied her friend's face. "Soft honey, you realize this sounds like the beginning of every Hallmark movie ever made, right? And those don't always translate well to real life." Before Sophia could respond, her phone buzzed. Text from Alexander. "Looking forward to coffee today. I made us a reservation at that little place in Brooklyn Heights you mentioned loving." Sophia frowned. "I never mentioned any place in Brooklyn Heights." "What?" Maya leaned over to read the message. "He says I mentioned some coffee shop in Brooklyn Heights, but we never talked about specific places." A strange look crossed Maya's face. "Soph, what exactly did this Margaret woman tell you about why they chose you?" "She said they had my information. Name, age, education, languages. She seemed to know everything about me. And you didn't find that weird?" "I was broke and desperate. $50,000 doesn't make you ask too many questions." Maya was quiet for a moment, then grabbed Sophia's laptop. "What's Alexander's full name again?" "Alexander Sterling." "Why?" "Alexander James Sterling," Maya read from a Forbes article. CEO of Sterling Industries, one of America's largest tech consulting firms. Harvard MBA, speaks 4 languages, never married. She paused. "Soph, look at this." She turned the laptop around. There was a photo of Alexander at a business conference, and standing beside him, looking very professional, was a woman Sophia recognized. "That's Margaret. But look at the caption." Sophia read aloud. "Alexander Sterling with his business partner and sister Margaret Sterling." "Sister," Maya repeated. "His sister set this up." A cold realization crept up Sophia's spine. But why would his own sister? Maya was already typing. "Let me search for Sophia Reed, Manhattan journalist." "Oh my gosh." "What?" "Soph, there are tons of Sophia Reeds in New York. But look at this." She clicked on a LinkedIn profile. Sophia Reed, 28, journalist, Columbia graduate, speaks 3 languages. It was a different woman, similar age, similar background, but definitely not Sophia. She lives in Brooklyn Heights. Maya continued reading near that coffee shop Alexander mentioned, and look at her photo. The woman in the photo was stunning. Tall, blonde, polished, everything Sophia felt she wasn't. "This is who they meant to hire," Sophia said slowly. "This is Alexander's actual type." "It gets stranger," Maya said, scrolling through more search results. This Sophia Reed was recently featured in Vanity Fair's Rising Stars Under 30 list. She runs her own media company, and Mia's voice trailed off. "What?" "She's dating someone, a tech entrepreneur from Silicon Valley." Maya looked up at Sophia. "I don't think this was just a random mistake." Sophia's phone rang. Alexander's name flashed on the screen. Answer it, Maya whispered. But be careful. Hi, Alexander. Sophia, I'm sorry, but I need to cancel coffee. His voice sounded strange, tense. Something unexpected came up. Is everything okay? Ah, yes. Maybe we can reschedule. There was something in his tone that made Sophia's stomach drop. Alexander, did something happen? A pause. Can I ask you something? And please be honest. Of course. Did you know who I was before Margaret called you? The question hit like a punch. What do you mean? I mean, did you know about my company, my family before that night? Alexander, I'd never heard of you before Margaret called. I swear. Another pause. Okay. I'll call you later. He hung up, leaving Sophia staring at her phone. That didn't sound good, Maya observed. No, it didn't. Sophia sank onto the couch. Maya, what if this whole thing was orchestrated? What if someone wanted me to meet Alexander specifically? But who and why? Before Sophia could answer, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find a courier with an envelope addressed to her. Inside was a single photograph and a note written in elegant handwriting. The photograph showed Alexander and Sophia at the charity gala laughing together. They looked genuinely happy, like a real couple. The note read, "Some mistakes are meant to happen. Don't let pride ruin what could be beautiful. A friend who believes in destiny." Okay, this is officially creepy, Mia said, reading over Sophia's shoulder. Sophia's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from the number Margaret had used. Don't answer it, Maya warned. But Sophia was tired of being confused and manipulated. She answered, "Margaret. Actually, this is Alexander." His voice was tight. "I borrowed Margaret's phone because I had some questions for her. Questions about how she found you, and she's not answering them very well. But I did find something interesting in her office." "What?" "A file with your name on it. Your real file, not the other Sophia Reed. Photos of you, your address, your work history, even your favorite coffee shop." Alexander paused. "Someone has been watching you, Sophia, for weeks." The apartment suddenly felt very cold. "Alexander, I have nothing to do with this. I swear, I believe you. But someone wanted us to meet, and they went to considerable lengths to make it happen." His voice softened slightly. "The question is why?" Sophia looked at the photograph again, the two of them laughing, looking so natural together. "Maybe," she said slowly, "we should find out together." "What do you mean?" "I mean, whoever did this clearly wants us together. Maybe instead of fighting it, we figure out who and why. That's either very brave or very foolish. Probably both. But Alexander, what we had that night, the connection, was that real for you?" A long pause. "Yes, it was real." "Then maybe that's what matters." "Sophia, you realize someone has been manipulating both of us. This could be dangerous. Or it could be the best mistake that ever happened to us." Another pause. "Are you always this optimistic about potentially dangerous situations?" "Only when they involve handsome billionaires and mysterious sisters." Alexander laughed, that same genuine laugh from the charity gala. "All right, but we do this carefully, and together," Sophia agreed. After hanging up, Maya shook her head. "You know this is crazy, right?" "Completely crazy," Sophia agreed. But she was smiling. "But Maya, what if whoever did this actually did us a favor? What if they saw something we couldn't see ourselves? Or what if they're complete psychopaths trying to manipulate you both for some unknown reason?" "Well," Sophia said, looking at the photograph of her and Alexander again, "I guess we're about to find out." Her phone buzzed with a text from Alexander. "Dinner tonight. We have some detective work to do, and Sophia, thank you for trusting me." As Sophia typed back her acceptance, she couldn't shake the feeling that whoever had orchestrated their meeting was still watching. But for the first time since this whole thing started, she wasn't afraid. She was curious. And maybe, just maybe, she was falling in love with a man who was supposed to be a stranger. The only problem was figuring out who wanted them together so badly, and what they stood to gain from it. That evening, Alexander's penthouse, Upper East Side. Alexander's penthouse overlooked Central Park, and under normal circumstances, Sophia would have been speechless at the view. But tonight, she was more focused on the wall of family photos Alexander had been showing her. trying to piece together the puzzle of Margaret's motives. There, Alexander pointed to a photo of himself with an elegant older woman. That's my grandmother, Eleanor Sterling, the family matriarch I mentioned. She's been pressuring me about marriage since I turned 30. She looks formidable, Sophia observed, studying the silver-haired woman who radiated authority even in a casual family photo. She has built the tech side of our business from scratch after my grandfather focused on traditional investments. Alexander moved to another photo, and this is Margaret with our parents. They died in a car accident when I was 22 and she was 18. Sophia's heart clenched. Alexander, I'm so sorry. It's been 10 years, but it made Margaret and me incredibly close. We only had each other and grandmother Eleanor. His expression darkened slightly, which is why what she did feels like such a betrayal. Sophia was studying the photos when something caught her eye. Alexander, who's that? She pointed to a young woman in several of the photos, always standing close to Alexander, but somehow seeming separate from the family group. Alexander's jaw tightened. That's Victoria Ashford, my ex-fiancée. Ex-fiancée. Sophia turned to face him. You didn't mention being engaged. It ended 18 months ago. Mutual decision. But his tone suggested it had been anything but mutual. Our families have been friends since childhood. Very traditional arrangement, very convenient for business. What happened? Alexander walked to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looking out at the city lights. I realized I didn't want to marry someone just because it made sense on paper. I wanted to marry someone I actually loved. The word love hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning. And Victoria wasn't pleased. Neither was her family or mine for that matter. Alexander turned back to Sophia. Breaking that engagement damaged some important business relationships. Cost us a major merger with the Ashford Group. Sophia felt the chill of understanding. Alexander, what if Margaret's matchmaking isn't just about your grandmother wanting you married? What if it's about your family wanting you married to someone who won't disrupt business? You mean someone they can control or someone they think would be better for the company than your independent streak? Alexander's phone buzzed. Margaret's name appeared on the screen. Answer it, Sophia said, but put it on speaker. Margaret, Alexander said, his voice carefully neutral. Alex, thank goodness I've been trying to reach you. Margaret's voice was cheerful, but there was an undertone of tension. How did coffee go with Sophia? Alexander looked at Sophia. We rescheduled. Margaret, I need answers. About what? About how exactly you found Sophia. Her real contact information, not some professional network nonsense. A pause. Alex, sweetheart, why all the questions? Isn't it enough that it worked out perfectly? You two looked absolutely magical together at the gala. Margaret. Alexander's voice was sharper now. I found the surveillance file in your office. The one with Sophia's photos and personal information going back weeks. Silence on the other end. Margaret. All right, fine. Margaret's voice changed, becoming more serious. Do you remember Café Gramercy? You go there every Tuesday morning for your standing meeting with the patent attorneys. Alexander frowned. Yes, 4 weeks ago, you helped a young woman who dropped her laptop bag in the rain. You gave her your umbrella and helped her save her work. Sophia's breath caught. She remembered that morning perfectly. She'd been rushing to meet a potential client, clumsy and stressed when a kind stranger had literally saved her laptop and her assignment. That was you, Alexander said, staring at Sophia. You were so kind to me, Sophia whispered. I never forgot it. Neither did Margaret, apparently, Alexander said, still looking at Sophia, but speaking to the phone. You were watching. I was having a business lunch at the table by the window, Margaret admitted. And Alex, the way you looked at her. I'd never seen you look at anyone like that, not even Victoria. So you decided to manipulate us both. I decided to give fate a helping hand. Margaret's composure was cracking. Alex, you've been miserable since you broke up with Victoria. And this girl, Sophia, she practically glowed when you helped her. I could see it from across the cafe. So you had her investigated. I had her researched. There's a difference. Not to me. Alex, listen. No, you listen. Alexander's voice was ice cold now. You violated both our privacy. You manipulated us into a fake relationship. And you did it all without our consent. I did it because I love you. Margaret's professional mask finally slipped completely. Alex, our family has been pushing you to reconcile with Victoria for months. Grandmother Eleanor, the board of directors, even the Ashfords are still hoping you'll come to your senses. Sophia felt the blood drain from her face. This was bigger than just family pressure. They don't care if you're happy, Margaret continued, her voice thick with emotion. They care about stock prices and merger opportunities. Victoria's family still controls 15% of Sterling Industries stock, and they're threatening to sell to our competitors if you don't. If I don't what? Alexander's voice was deadly quiet. If you don't give the relationship another chance, and you thought hiring Sophia would solve this. How exactly? I thought if you met someone real, someone who could love you for you and not your portfolio, you'd finally have the strength to stand up to them all. Sophia found her voice. Margaret, what makes you think I'm the right person for that? Because you didn't know who he was when you met him in the cafe, but you still smiled at him like he'd made your whole day. Because when he helped you, you looked at him like he was a hero, not a bank account. And because Margaret's voice softened. I've watched my brother be lonely for 18 months, afraid to trust anyone new because he thinks they're all after his money. But with you, even in fake circumstances, he was himself again. Alexander was staring at Sophia, and she could see him processing everything. There's something else you both need to know, Margaret said quietly. What now? Alexander asked, though he sounded resigned rather than angry. Grandmother Eleanor wants to meet Sophia tomorrow. Alexander went very still. What? She saw the photos from the charity gala in the Time Society section. She's intrigued. Margaret, absolutely not. Alex, she's flying in from the Hamptons specifically to meet her. If you don't bring Sophia, then I don't bring her. Grandmother Eleanor will have to be disappointed. She said if you show up without your girlfriend, she'll assume you're not serious about anyone and she'll support the board's recommendation about Victoria. Sophia saw Alexander go pale. What board recommendation? Their merger proposal. Victoria's family is offering to drop their threat to sell their shares if you agree to a 6-month reconciliation period, which is just code for get back together or lose the company. Alexander said grimly. Pretty much, Margaret admitted. Sophia watched Alexander's face as he realized the trap he was in. This wasn't just about family expectations. It was about his life's work. Alexander, Sophia said quietly, maybe I should meet her. No, I won't drag you into this mess. I'm already in it. And besides, she managed a small smile. I'm curious about the woman who raised someone like you. Sophia, you don't understand. My grandmother is formidable. She'll see through any pretense immediately. Then we don't pretend. We tell her the truth, that we met by chance, that we're getting to know each other, and that we're not making any promises about the future. Alexander looked at her for a long moment. You're serious. I'm serious. Margaret, Alexander said into the phone, set up the meeting, but somewhere public, somewhere Sophia will feel comfortable. Actually, Margaret said hesitantly, she wants to have brunch at the family estate in the Hamptons. Absolutely not. It's not really a request, Alex. It's more of a royal summons. Alexander closed his eyes. Fine, but I'm driving Sophia myself, and we leave when we want to leave. Agreed. 11:00 tomorrow. After Margaret hung up, Alexander and Sophia sat in silence for a moment. You know you don't have to do this, Alexander said finally. I know, but Alexander, I want to meet the woman who shaped you, and I want her to know that the woman you're falling for isn't going anywhere just because she doesn't come from money. Alexander stared at her. Falling for? Sophia blushed, but met his eyes. Aren't you? I am completely. But Sophia, if my grandmother decides she doesn't approve of you, then we'll figure it out together. Alexander reached for her hand. You realize my family is completely dysfunctional, right? So is mine. You just haven't met them yet. Is that an invitation? Maybe if you survive tomorrow. Alexander laughed and pulled her closer. You know, for a woman who was accidentally hired to be my fake girlfriend, you're remarkably brave about meeting terrifying family matriarchs. Well, Sophia said, settling into his arms, someone has to keep you from getting back together with Victoria Ashford. Is that jealousy I detect? Maybe a little. Alexander kissed the top of her head. Good. I like you jealous. Alexander. Yeah. Tomorrow when we meet your grandmother. What if she actually likes me? Then Alexander said, we'll have an even bigger problem. Why? Because then she'll want to plan our wedding. Sophia laughed, but part of her wondered if that would really be such a problem after all. The Hamptons, New York, Sterling family estate. The drive to the Hamptons took 2 hours, giving Sophia plenty of time to second-guess her decision to meet Eleanor Sterling. Alexander had tried to prepare her during the drive, describing his grandmother as brilliant, intimidating, and capable of seeing through any deception within 30 seconds, which wasn't exactly reassuring. She built Sterling Industries' tech division from nothing, Alexander explained as they turned into a treeing driveway that seemed to stretch for miles. When my grandfather wanted to stick with traditional investments, she convinced him to diversify into emerging technologies. That decision made us one of the wealthiest families in New York, and she controls how much of the company, 60% directly, another 15% through various trusts. She could fire me tomorrow if she wanted to. Alexander glanced at Sophia, who was staring out the window at the approaching mansion. Having second thoughts, third and fourth thoughts, Sophia admitted, Alexander, what if she takes one look at me and decides I'm completely wrong for you? Then she'll be wrong. Alexander reached over and squeezed her hand. Sophia, my grandmother values authenticity above everything else. Don't try to be someone you're not. Just be the woman who impressed me so much that I forgot our arrangement was fake. The Sterling estate was breathtaking. A sprawling Georgian mansion overlooking the Atlantic Ocean with perfectly manicured gardens and enough land to constitute its own small town. As they pulled up to the main entrance, Sophia spotted at least 3 other luxury cars in the circular driveway. We're not the only guests, she observed. Alexander's face darkened as he recognized the vehicles. That's Victoria's Mercedes and her parents' Bentley. He looked at Sophia apologetically. I'm sorry. I had no idea they'd be here. Your grandmother invited your ex-fiancé to meet your current girlfriend, apparently. So Alexander turned off the engine and turned to face Sophia. We can leave right now if you want. Just say the word. Sophia looked at the imposing mansion, then at Alexander's worried face. She thought about Margaret's words. How Alexander had been lonely for 18 months. How his family was trying to force him back into a relationship that would benefit business, but not his heart. No, she said firmly. If this is some kind of test, then let's pass it. Alexander smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all morning. Have I mentioned that you're incredible? Not nearly enough. They were met at the front door by a uniformed butler who looked like he'd been with the family for decades. Mr. Alexander, Miss Reed, Mrs. Sterling is expecting you on the terrace. The interior of the house was as impressive as the exterior, high ceilings, priceless artwork, and furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. But Sophia barely had time to take it in before they were led through French doors onto a stone terrace overlooking the ocean. Eleanor Sterling was holding court at a row iron table set for 6, and Sophia immediately understood why Alexander had called her formidable. She was in her mid-70s, but looked 20 years younger, with silver hair styled in an elegant chignon, sharp blue eyes that seemed to catalog everything, and an aura of command that made everyone else on the terrace seem like supporting characters. Alexander, darling, Eleanor rose gracefully and embraced her grandson. And this must be the famous Sophia Reed. Sophia found herself being assessed by the most penetrating gaze she'd ever encountered. Eleanor's handshake was firm, her smile polite but measuring. Mrs. Sterling, thank you so much for inviting me. Your home is absolutely beautiful. Please call me Eleanor. And yes, it is beautiful, isn't it? Alexander's grandfather and I built it as our retreat from the city. Now it's become something of a family gathering place. Eleanor's eyes never left Sophia's face. I understand you're a journalist. I am freelance, mostly investigative pieces. How interesting. And what draws you to investigative work? Sophia sensed this was more than polite conversation. I believe people deserve to know the truth, especially when powerful interests would prefer they didn't. Eleanor's eyebrow arched slightly. Whether in approval or concern, Sophia couldn't tell. "Alexander," a familiar voice interrupted. "What a pleasant surprise." Sophia turned to see a tall blonde woman approaching from the other end of the terrace. Victoria Ashford was everything the photos had suggested and more. Stunningly beautiful in an effortless old-money way. Wearing a designer sundress that probably cost more than Sophia's monthly rent, and carrying herself with the confidence of someone who'd never doubted her place in the world. "Victoria," Alexander's voice was carefully neutral. "I didn't know you'd be here. Mother mentioned Eleanor had invited us for brunch. I hope you don't mind." Victoria's smile was perfect as she turned to Sophia. "And you must be the journalist." "I'm Victoria Ashford, Sophia Reed. Nice to meet you." Victoria's handshake was as polished as everything else about her, but Sophia caught something calculating in her eyes. A quick assessment that left Sophia feeling somehow found wanting. "Shall we sit?" Eleanor suggested. "I've had cook prepare something special." As they settled around the table, Sophia found herself strategically placed between Alexander and Eleanor, with Victoria directly across from her. The other guests, Victoria's parents, whom Eleanor introduced as Charles and Patricia Ashford, flanked Victoria like elegant bookends. "So, Sophia," Charles Ashford said as the first course was served, "Alexander tells us you graduated from Columbia Journalism School." "Yes, sir." "And what was your focus?" Sophia sensed another test. "Investigative reporting with an emphasis on corporate accountability." A slight smile played at Eleanor's lips. "How apropos. And what stories have you worked on recently?" "I just completed a piece on tech companies using user data without proper disclosure. It's being reviewed by several publications." "Really?" Victoria leaned forward with apparent interest. "Which companies?" Sophia named several major tech firms, including two that she knew were Sterling Industries clients. She watched Eleanor's reaction carefully, but the older woman's face remained impassive. "How fascinating," Patricia Ashford said in a tone that suggested the opposite. "And is that lucrative work?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Sophia felt Alexander tense beside her. "It can be," Sophia replied evenly, "when publications are willing to pay for thorough research and fact-checking." "Of course, freelance work must be so unpredictable," Victoria said with apparent sympathy. "The uncertainty, the irregular income. I imagine it would be difficult to plan for the future." Sophia realized she was being deliberately provoked. Victoria was pointing out in the most polite way possible that Sophia was financially unstable and therefore unsuitable for someone in Alexander's position. "I find uncertainty keeps life interesting," Sophia replied, "and integrity matters more to me than a steady paycheck." "How admirable," Eleanor said, and this time Sophia was certain she caught approval in the older woman's voice. "Tell me, Sophia, what did you think of the charity gala the other night?" "It was eye-opening. I had no idea how much good could be accomplished when people with resources decide to use them responsibly." "And what did you think of Alexander's speech about sustainable technology initiatives?" Sophia paused. Alexander hadn't given a speech at the gala. This was a trap. Eleanor was testing whether Sophia had actually paid attention to Alexander or had been focused on the performance aspect of their arrangement. "Actually," Sophia said carefully, "Alexander didn't give a speech that night, but we did have several interesting conversations about sustainable tech with other guests. His knowledge of renewable energy applications was impressive." Eleanor's smile became genuinely warm for the first time. Indeed, it was. "Alexander has been championing environmental initiatives within Sterling Industries for years, sometimes against considerable resistance," Alexander added, glancing meaningfully at the Ashfords. "Change is always difficult," Charles Ashford said diplomatically. "Traditional approaches have served our families well for generations, but tradition without innovation leads to stagnation," Sophia observed. "The companies that adapt to changing values and technologies are the ones that survive." "An interesting perspective," Eleanor said. "And what changes do you think are most important for businesses to embrace?" Sophia found herself in an animated discussion with Eleanor about corporate responsibility, environmental sustainability, and the role of technology in solving social problems. She was vaguely aware that Victoria was growing increasingly quiet, and that Alexander was watching the exchange with something like amazement. "Excuse me," Victoria said, suddenly standing. "I think I need some air." She walked to the edge of the terrace, and after a moment, Alexander excused himself to follow her. Sophia tried not to watch as they engaged in what appeared to be an intense, quiet conversation. "She's lovely," Patricia Ashford said, though her tone suggested otherwise. "Yes, she is," Eleanor replied firmly. "Intelligent, principled, and completely unimpressed by wealth or status. Quite refreshing, actually." Sophia felt a flush of gratitude toward Eleanor, but she could see the Ashfords exchanging worried glances. "Eleanor, dear," Charles said carefully, "surely you can see that Alexander and Victoria have so much history together. They understand each other's worlds. They understand each other's bank accounts," Eleanor corrected sharply. "There's a difference." At the edge of the terrace, Victoria and Alexander's conversation seemed to be growing more heated. "Sophia caught fragments, throwing away everything we built, and never loved me the way you look at her." Finally, Victoria stalked back to the table, her perfect composure cracked. "I think we should go," she announced to her parents. This was clearly a mistake. "Victoria, darling," her mother began. "No, mother. It's obvious that Alexander has made his choice." Victoria's eyes flashed as she looked at Sophia. "I just hope he doesn't regret it when reality sets in." "What's that supposed to mean?" Alexander demanded, returning to the table. "It means that fairy tales don't last, Alex. Eventually, the differences in your backgrounds, your experiences, your expectations, they all matter." Victoria's voice was sad now rather than angry. "I know you think love conquers all, but in our world, compatibility matters more than chemistry." "Victoria," Eleanor's voice was steel. "That's enough." But Victoria wasn't finished. "Ask yourself this, Sophia. What happens when the novelty wears off? When Alexander's friends and business associates expect you to fit into a world you don't understand? When you realize that being with him means living in a fishbowl where every decision you make reflects on his family's reputation?" Sophia felt the words hit their mark. These were exactly the fears she'd been trying to suppress. "Victoria," Alexander's voice was warning. "When you realize," Victoria continued relentlessly, "that you'll never be anything more than a charity case he rescued. That his family will always see you as the woman who wasn't good enough, who needed to be elevated to his level. Enough." Eleanor's voice cracked like a whip. "Victoria Ashford, you will leave my home immediately." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria looked stricken, as if she hadn't meant to go that far. "Eleanor, I'm sorry. I didn't mean." "Yes, you did. And now everyone knows exactly what kind of person you are." Eleanor stood, radiating dignity and controlled fury. "Charles, Patricia, I think it's time for you to take your daughter home." The Ashfords departed in a flurry of awkward apologies and wounded pride, leaving Sophia, Alexander, and Eleanor alone on the terrace. Sophia was fighting back tears, Victoria's words echoing in her head. "The worst part was that some of them rang true, Sophia," Eleanor said gently, settling back into her chair. "I owe you an apology." "You do. I invited the Ashfords here today as a test. I wanted to see how you'd handle yourself in a difficult situation, and how Alexander would react to having you and Victoria in the same room." Eleanor's expression was rueful. "I didn't anticipate that Victoria would be quite so vicious." "She wasn't entirely wrong, though," Sophia said quietly. "Our backgrounds are completely different. I don't know anything about your world, my dear girl," Eleanor said firmly. "I didn't build Sterling Industries by worrying about what other people thought was appropriate. I married a man whose family thought I was beneath them because I was Irish Catholic and worked for a living. They spent years trying to make me feel inadequate." She leaned forward, her eyes intense. "Do you know what I learned?" Sophia shook her head. "That people who try to make you feel small do so because they're threatened by your authenticity. Victoria attacked you because she could see that what you and Alexander have is real, something she never had with him. But she's right about the practical issues." "Nonsense. You want to know what I saw today? I saw a young woman who held her own in conversation with some of the most influential people on the East Coast, who showed grace under pressure and didn't back down from her principles when challenged, who clearly makes my grandson happier than I've seen him in years." Eleanor's smile was warm. "That's not someone who needs to be elevated to anyone's level. That's someone who elevates others simply by being herself. Sophia felt tears threatening again, but for different reasons this time. Alexander, Eleanor continued, you've been an idiot for the past 18 months, trying to find someone who fits some imaginary ideal instead of recognizing real value when it was right in front of you. Don't make that mistake again. Alexander reached for Sophia's hand. I don't intend to. Good. Because Sophia, if you're willing to put up with my insufferable grandson and his complicated family, you have my complete support. Eleanor's eyes twinkled, and I should warn you, when Eleanor Sterling gives her support, it's rather comprehensive. What do you mean? Sophia asked. I mean that the Ashfords' little stock manipulation scheme just became irrelevant. I've been looking for an excuse to buy out their shares anyway. Their business practices have become increasingly questionable. Eleanor's smile turned predatory. Consider it my engagement gift. Grandmother, Alexander said carefully. We're not engaged yet, Eleanor replied serenely. But I have excellent instincts about these things. As if on cue, Margaret appeared on the terrace slightly out of breath. I'm sorry I'm late. Traffic was murder getting out of the city. She stopped short when she saw only the three of them. Where are the Ashfords? Gone, Eleanor said simply. And good riddance. Margaret's eyes widened as she took in the scene. Sophia looking slightly stunned. Alexander protective and relieved, and Eleanor radiating satisfaction. What did I miss? The end of the Victoria Ashford era, Alexander said, putting his arm around Sophia. And hopefully the beginning of something much better. Margaret grinned. So my matchmaking worked. Your manipulation worked, Alexander corrected. But only because you accidentally found exactly the right woman. It wasn't an accident, Margaret said smugly. I told you I have excellent instincts. Apparently, it runs in the family. Eleanor observed. Now shall we have dessert? I believe we have something to celebrate. As they settled in for what turned into a 3-hour meal filled with family stories, gentle teasing, and increasingly comfortable conversation, Sophia began to understand what she'd stumbled into. This wasn't just a wealthy family. It was a group of people who, despite their considerable resources and influence, valued authenticity, intelligence, and loyalty above all else. So what happens now? Sophia asked as they prepared to leave. Now, Eleanor said, embracing her warmly. You become part of this family if you want to. What about the business issues, the board pressure? Eleanor waved dismissively. Let me worry about the board. They'll fall in line once they understand that the Ashford alliance is no longer beneficial. Her smile turned sharp. I didn't get where I am by letting other people dictate my family's future. During the drive back to Manhattan, Sophia and Alexander were quiet, both processing the day's events. Are you okay? Alexander asked finally. I think so. Your grandmother is not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone cold and intimidating. Instead, she's just formidable. There's a difference. There is. And Sophia about what Victoria said. She wasn't entirely wrong. Sophia interrupted. I don't know your world. I don't know the rules, the expectations, the social codes. So, we'll learn together. Sophia, I don't want you to change to fit my world. I want my world to be worthy of you. Sophia looked at him. This man who'd started as a stranger, become a fake boyfriend, and was now. What exactly, Alexander? What are we doing here, really? He pulled over to the side of the road and turned to face her. We're falling in love, he said simply. Despite the manipulation, despite the complications, despite the fact that it started as a lie, we're falling in love, and I think we should stop fighting it. Sophia studied his face, the strong jaw, the green eyes that had caught her attention that first night, the expression of complete honesty. Your grandmother said she has excellent instincts about engagements. She does. It's actually kind of scary, Alexander. Yeah, I think I'm ready to stop fighting it too. He kissed her then, right there on the side of the road with the sun setting behind them and the city lights beginning to twinkle ahead. And for the first time since this whole crazy adventure began, Sophia wasn't thinking about money or manipulation or social differences. She was thinking that sometimes the best mistakes are the ones that lead you exactly where you belong. 1 week later, Manhattan. Sophia was beginning to think that falling in love with Alexander Sterling had been the easy part. It was everything that came after that threatened to overwhelm her completely. The past week had been a whirlwind of activity that left her feeling like Alice tumbling down the rabbit hole. Eleanor had wasted no time in making good on her promise to handle the business complications. By Wednesday, news broke that Sterling Industries had acquired the Ashford Group's shares in what the financial press called a brilliant strategic move. By Friday, Victoria Ashford was reportedly engaged to a banking heir from Boston, which according to Margaret was suspiciously convenient timing. But it wasn't the business machinations that had Sophia's head spinning. It was the sudden, overwhelming reality of being Alexander Sterling's very public girlfriend. "You need to see this," Maya said, bursting into Sophia's apartment with her laptop and a concerned expression. "It's trending on social media." Sophia looked up from the article she was trying to write, a piece about sustainable agriculture that seemed laughably mundane compared to her current life circumstances. "What's trending? You are." Maya turned the laptop around, revealing a Twitter thread with thousands of retweets. The header read, "Who is Sophia Reed? Everything we know about Alexander Sterling's mystery girlfriend." Sophia's stomach dropped as she scrolled through the thread. Someone had done an impressively thorough investigation of her life, complete with her college graduation photos, excerpts from articles she'd written, and even a picture of her apartment building. "This is insane," she breathed. "How did they get all this information?" "Welcome to dating a billionaire," Maya said grimly. "Look at the comments." The comments were a mix of curiosity, admiration, and outright hostility. Some praised her journalistic work and called her a refreshing change from the usual socialite types. Others questioned her motives, suggested she was a gold digger, and speculated about how long the relationship would last. But it was the comments from other journalists that stung the most. Several writers she'd previously respected had posted variations of, "Guess we know how Sophia Reed plans to advance her career now, and from investigating corporations to sleeping with CEOs. Quite a career pivot, Sophia," Maya said gently. "You knew this was going to happen, right? You can't date someone that famous without people paying attention." "I knew intellectually, but seeing it all laid out like this." Sophia gestured helplessly at the screen. "Maya, they're questioning my professional integrity. These are people whose opinions matter in my field." Her phone rang. Alexander's name appeared on the screen. "Hey," she answered, trying to sound normal. "Have you seen the social media stuff?" His voice was tight with anger. "Maya is showing me now. I'm so sorry, Sophia. I should have anticipated this. Should have prepared you better. My publicist is already working on damage control." "Your publicist, Rachel Martinez. She handles all media relations for Sterling Industries. She's very good at her job." The idea of needing a publicist to manage her personal life felt surreal. "Alexander, I don't know if I'm cut out for this level of scrutiny. You shouldn't have to be. Listen, I'm coming over. We need to talk about how to handle this." After he hung up, Sophia continued scrolling through the social media posts, each one making her feel smaller and more exposed. Maya sat beside her, offering silent support. "You know what the worst part is?" Sophia said finally. "Some of these comments aren't wrong. I am from a completely different world than Alexander. I am struggling financially, and yes, being with him does change my professional prospects. So what? You think you're the first person to fall in love across social classes. You think Eleanor Sterling didn't face the same kind of scrutiny when she married into that family. That was different. She was building something, creating value. I'm just there." Maya grabbed the laptop and closed it firmly. "Sophia Reed, you are one of the most talented investigative journalists I know. You've exposed corruption, held powerful people accountable, and done it all while barely scraping by financially because you refuse to compromise your principles. Don't let a bunch of internet trolls make you forget who you are." Before Sophia could respond, there was a knock at the door. She opened it to find Alexander looking unusually harried, accompanied by a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with perfectly styled black hair and an expression of controlled urgency. "Sophia, this is Rachel Martinez," Alexander said. "Rachel, Sophia Reed." Rachel's handshake was brisk and professional. "Miss Reed, We need to discuss strategy immediately. The story is spreading faster than we anticipated, and we need to get ahead of it. Strategy for what exactly? Sophia asked, feeling increasingly overwhelmed. For managing your public image right now. The narrative is being written by other people, bloggers, gossip columnists, social media users who don't know you. We need to craft a counter-narrative that presents you in the proper light. I'm sorry, but I don't want to be presented in any light. I just want to be left alone to do my job and live my life. Rachel and Alexander exchanged a look. Miss Reed, Rachel said carefully, I understand this is overwhelming, but you're dating one of the most prominent businessmen in America. Privacy is no longer an option. The best we can do is control the message. What does that mean practically? Rachel pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through what appeared to be a detailed presentation. We start with a carefully crafted interview, maybe with Vanity Fair or Harper's Bazaar. Something that positions you as an accomplished professional who happens to be in a relationship with Alexander, not as a nobody who got lucky. But I am a nobody who got lucky, Sophia protested. No, Alexander said firmly. You're an accomplished journalist who happens to be dating me. There's a significant difference. Rachel nodded approvingly. Exactly. We emphasize your educational background, your professional achievements, your commitment to social justice. We position this as a meeting of equals. Except we're not equals, Sophia said. Alexander owns companies. I can barely pay my rent. Financial equality isn't the only kind that matters. Rachel replied smoothly, you bring intellectual equality, moral equality, professional accomplishment. The narrative becomes successful businessman meets brilliant journalist finds intellectual and emotional partnership. Maya, who had been listening from the kitchen, suddenly spoke up. What about the investigation? Everyone turned to look at her. Maya, Sophia said warningly. No, I think this is important. Sophia, you've been so focused on managing the fallout from your relationship that you've completely forgotten about the mystery behind how it started. Rachel looked confused. What mystery? Alexander and Sophia exchanged glances. They hadn't told anyone outside the family about Margaret's manipulation or the surveillance file. It's complicated, Alexander said finally. Uncomplicated it, Rachel demanded. If there are skeletons in this closet, I need to know about them now before someone else digs them up. Sophia made a decision. Maya's right. Rachel, what I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room, but you need to understand what we're really dealing with. Over the next hour, Sophia and Alexander laid out the entire story. The mistaken phone call, the wrong Sophia Reed, Margaret's surveillance and manipulation, even the mysterious note about destiny. Rachel listened with the focused intensity of a crisis management expert, taking notes and asking pointed questions. So, let me get this straight, Rachel said when they finished. Your sister hired what she thought was a different woman to be your fake girlfriend, accidentally hired Sophia instead, and this accidental meeting led to a real relationship. That's the simplified version. Yes, Alexander confirmed. And there's documented evidence of surveillance, investigation, and deliberate manipulation. Yes, Rachel was quiet for a long moment, staring at her notes. This is either the most romantic story I've ever heard or a potential public relations nightmare. Which one do you think it is? Sophia asked. Both. If this story gets out the wrong way, it'll be spun as a billionaire so desperate for companionship that his family had to hire him a girlfriend. The implications for Alexander's business reputation would be significant. Sophia felt her heart sink. She'd been so focused on her own exposure that she hadn't fully considered how this could damage Alexander professionally. On the other hand, Rachel continued, if we control the narrative, this becomes the ultimate modern fairy tale. Fate intervening to bring two people together despite the odds, overcoming deception to find real love. You want us to publicize the manipulation? Alexander asked, incredulous. I want us to reframe it not as manipulation, but as destiny with a helping hand. Margaret becomes the loving sister who saw her brother's loneliness and engineered a chance encounter. The surveillance becomes research to ensure compatibility. The fake relationship becomes the catalyst for discovering real feelings. Sophia shook her head. I don't want to lie about what happened. We wouldn't be lying. We'd be emphasizing certain aspects while downplaying others. It's all about perspective. Rachel, Alexander said carefully. What happens if we don't do any of this? If we just ignore the media attention and let it die down naturally? Rachel's expression was grim. It won't die down. Alexander, your front page news. Your relationship status affects stock prices. Sophia, whether you like it or not, you're now a public figure. The attention will continue, and without active management, the narrative will be written by people who don't have your best interests at heart. As if to prove Rachel's point, Sophia's phone began buzzing with calls from unknown numbers. Her email inbox was filling with interview requests, invitations to events, and offers for various endorsement deals. This is insane, Sophia muttered, watching the notifications multiply. This is your life now, Rachel said matter-of-factly. The question is whether you want to have some control over it or let it control you. Alexander moved to sit beside Sophia on the couch. Whatever you decide, I'll support. If you want to retreat from public life, I'll do everything in my power to protect your privacy. If you want to engage on your terms, I'll make sure you have all the resources you need. Sophia looked around the room at Maya, whose concern was evident, at Rachel, whose professional competence was both reassuring and intimidating, at Alexander, whose love and support were unwavering, but whose very presence in her life had created this situation. I need some air, she said, suddenly standing up. I need to think. Sophia, Alexander started to rise. Alone, please. I need a few minutes to process all of this. She grabbed her jacket and headed for the door, leaving the three of them in her small apartment to discuss her future without her. The streets of Manhattan were busy with the usual evening rush, and for a few minutes, Sophia allowed herself to blend into the crowd of anonymous people going about their normal lives. She found herself walking toward Central Park, seeking the relative quiet of the tree-lined paths. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Saw the news. Congratulations on landing the big fish. Hope the money's worth your integrity. A former colleague. Sophia stared at the message, feeling a mix of anger and hurt. This person, whoever they were, had distilled all her fears into one brutal sentence. Was she selling out? Had she compromised her principles for financial security and social status? Another text, this one from a number she recognized. Sophia, it's Dr. Harrison from Columbia. Saw the social media buzz. Don't let the critics get to you. You were one of our most principled students, and I'm sure you still are. Proud of you, Professor H. Professor Harrison had been her ethics instructor and thesis advisor. His message brought tears to her eyes, but also clarity. She wasn't the same person who had started this journey a week ago, but she was still fundamentally herself. The question wasn't whether she was compromising her integrity. It was whether she was strong enough to maintain it under unprecedented pressure. Her phone rang. Eleanor Sterling's name appeared on the screen. Mrs. Sterling, Eleanor, dear, and I'm calling because Margaret told me about the social media situation. How are you holding up? Sophia found herself pouring out her fears and frustrations to Alexander's grandmother. The professional criticism, the public scrutiny, the feeling of being overwhelmed by forces beyond her control. Sophia, Eleanor said when she finished. May I tell you a story? Of course. When I married Alexander's grandfather in 1968, I was 23 years old and working as a secretary at an investment firm. Robert Sterling was 35, recently inherited the family business, and considered one of the most eligible bachelors in New York. The society pages had a field day. Sophia settled onto a park bench, listening intently. They called me a gold digger, a social climber, a secretary who had seduced her way into wealth. The criticism was vicious and relentless. I cried for weeks. What changed? I realized that their opinion of me mattered far less than my opinion of myself. And more importantly, I understood that I had a choice. I could let their criticism diminish me, or I could use it as motivation to prove them wrong. How did you prove them wrong? By becoming indispensable, by learning everything I could about the business, by contributing ideas and insights that helped the company grow, by earning my place through competence rather than just marriage. Eleanor's voice grew stronger. Sophia, you have skills and talents that brought you to Alexander's attention long before he knew your name. Don't let anyone, including yourself, forget that. But the situation is so complicated now. The publicity, The scrutiny. The situation is what you make of it. You can retreat and let others define you, or you can step forward and define yourself. But whatever you choose, make sure it's your choice, not a reaction to other people's expectations. After Eleanor hung up, Sophia sat in the park for another hour, watching people walk by and thinking about choices. She thought about the young woman who had spilled coffee on her laptop and been rescued by a kind stranger. She thought about the journalist who had spent years investigating corruption and holding powerful people accountable. She thought about the woman who had impressed Eleanor Sterling, not with her pedigree, but with her principles. When she finally returned to her apartment, Rachel was gone. But Alexander and Maya were still there, clearly worried. "I'm sorry for running out," Sophia said. "I needed to get my head straight." And Alexander asked carefully, "And I've decided that Rachel is right. If I'm going to be a public figure, I want some control over how I'm presented. But I have conditions." Alexander's relief was visible. "Name them." "First, no lies. We can emphasize positive aspects and downplay negatives. But everything we say publicly has to be true." "Agreed." "Second, I don't want to become a professional girlfriend. Whatever publicity we do has to include my work as a journalist. I want to use this platform to highlight the stories and causes I care about." "That's actually brilliant," Maya interjected. "You'll have access to people and platforms you never could have reached before." "Third," Sophia continued, "I want to maintain some privacy. I'll do interviews and public appearances, but my personal space, this apartment, my family, my close friendships, those stay off limits. Rachel can make that work," Alexander assured her. And finally, Sophia took a deep breath. "I want to be involved in every decision about how our relationship is presented publicly. No surprises, no strategies I haven't approved." Alexander moved closer to her. "Sophia, are you sure about this? Once we start down this path, it'll be hard to go back to anonymity." "I think anonymity was never really an option once I fell in love with you," she said, reaching for his hand. "But I'd rather face this challenge as your partner than run away and spend the rest of my life wondering what if." He pulled her into his arms. And for a moment, the complications faded away. This was what mattered. Not the publicity or the scrutiny or the business implications, but this connection between them that had started accidentally and grown into something real and precious. "So, what's our first move?" Sophia asked. Rachel suggested a profile piece with a major magazine, something that lets you tell your story in your own words. And then we figure out how to build a life together in the public eye without losing ourselves in the process. Sophia's phone buzzed with another notification, another interview request, another invitation to a high-profile event. Instead of feeling overwhelmed, she felt a spark of determination. These people wanted to know who Sophia Reed was. She'd show them, but she'd do it on her own terms. The next morning, Sophia woke up to find that someone had leaked photos of Alexander leaving her apartment building. The headlines were already writing themselves. Sterling Ayres' overnight visit to girlfriend's modest apartment, and from penthouse to studio, love knows no boundaries. Instead of panic, Sophia felt a strange sense of liberation. The speculation was over. Their relationship was fully public now, which meant they could stop hiding and start living authentically. Her phone rang. Rachel Martinez. "Good morning, Sophia. I assume you've seen the photos." "I have. We need to move quickly now. I've got Vogue interested in an exclusive profile, and Alexander's publicist thinks we should coordinate with a business piece for Forbes. We can control the narrative completely." "Set up the meetings," Sophia said. "I'm ready." After hanging up, she looked around her small apartment, the place where this whole adventure had begun with a mysterious phone call. Soon, she'd probably move somewhere more secure, more appropriate for Alexander's girlfriend. But for now, this was still her space, her sanctuary. Alexander emerged from her tiny kitchen carrying 2 cups of coffee, looking ridiculously handsome in rumpled clothes from the night before. "Any regrets?" he asked, settling beside her on the couch. Sophia considered the question seriously. A week ago, she'd been a struggling freelance journalist with an empty bank account and an uncertain future. Now, she was dating a billionaire, being courted by major magazines, and facing a level of public scrutiny that would have terrified her former self. None, she said, surprising herself with how much she meant it. You only that it took Margaret's manipulation to bring us together. I should have asked you out that day in the cafe. Maybe, or maybe we needed all the complications to appreciate what we have. Alexander sat down his coffee and pulled her closer. I love you, Sophia Reed. Fake girlfriend, real girlfriend, future wife. Whatever title you want to claim, I love you, future wife. Sophia raised an eyebrow. Too presumptuous. Ask me again in 6 months when we've survived our first major scandal together. Deal. But Sophia, yeah, I have a feeling we can survive anything as long as we're honest with each other and remember that none of this, the money, the publicity, the business pressure matters as much as what we found together. Sophia kissed him, tasting coffee and possibility, and the promise of a future that was uncertain but no longer frightening. Outside her window, Manhattan was waking up to another day of possibilities, and for the first time since this whole adventure began, Sophia felt ready to meet whatever came next. The accidental bride was becoming an intentional partner, and the story was just beginning. 3 months later, Manhattan. The Vogue profile had been everything Rachel promised and more. Shot by Annie Leibovitz in locations that ranged from Sophia's old apartment to the Sterling Industries boardroom. The 12-page spread titled "The Journalist Who Captured a Sterling Heart" had repositioned Sophia from mystery girlfriend to accomplished professional in the public consciousness. The Forbes piece on Alexander had run simultaneously, painting them as a power couple, united by shared values and complementary strengths. But it was the investigative piece Sophia had published in The Atlantic 3 weeks later that truly changed everything. Corporate accountability in the digital age. How tech giants manipulate public opinion had been 6 months in the making, begun long before she'd ever heard of Alexander Sterling. The timing of its publication, however, couldn't have been more perfect. Here was proof that Sophia Reed was nobody's trophy girlfriend. She was a journalist with the skills and courage to take on billion-dollar corporations. The article had sparked congressional hearings, SEC investigations, and a reckoning within the tech industry that was still playing out. More importantly for Sophia, it had silenced most of her critics and established her as a serious voice in contemporary journalism. Now, as she sat in the back of a town car heading toward the Plaza Hotel for the Metropolitan Museum's annual benefit gala, Sophia reflected on how much had changed since that first charity event 3 months ago. You're nervous, Alexander observed, adjusting his bow tie in the reflection of the car window. A little, Sophia admitted, smoothing the skirt of her custom Valentino gown. Midnight blue, like the dress from their first evening together, but infinitely more sophisticated. This is my first Met Gala. The guest list reads like a who's who of American culture. You'll be fine. You've interviewed senators and CEOs. A few celebrities and philanthropists should be easy. It's not the celebrities I'm worried about, Sophia said. It's the other journalists. Half the media establishment will be there, and some of them still see me as the journalist who's sleeping her way to access. Alexander reached for her hand. Sophia, your Atlantic piece changed the national conversation about corporate responsibility. Anyone who still questions your credentials is willfully ignorant. The car pulled up to the red carpet, and Sophia felt her nerves spike. Through the tinted windows, she could see the wall of photographers, the velvet ropes, the controlled chaos of one of New York's most prestigious social events. Ready? Alexander asked. Sophia took a deep breath, remembering Eleanor Sterling's advice about defining herself rather than letting others do it. Ready. The moment they stepped out of the car, camera flashes exploded around them. Sophia had grown somewhat accustomed to media attention over the past 3 months, but this was on another level entirely. She could hear photographers shouting their names, reporters calling out questions, fans screaming from behind the barriers. Sophia Alexander, over here, Miss Reed. How does it feel to be dating America's most eligible bachelor? Mr. Sterling, any comment on the rumors about an engagement? That last question made both of them pause. They'd been careful not to discuss marriage publicly, though the speculation had been constant since Eleanor's comments about wedding planning had somehow leaked to the gossip columns. Just keep walking and smile, Alexander murmured, his hands steady on her back as they made their way up the museum steps. Inside the museum, the atmosphere was more controlled. but no less intense. The cream of American society mingled beneath priceless works of art. Champagne flowed freely, and conversations that would shape policy and culture for months to come happened in whispered aids. Sophia Reed, a familiar voice called out across the crowded reception area. Sophia turned to see Catherine Morrison, the editor-in-chief of Harper's Bazaar, approaching with a warm smile. Catherine had been one of the first major media figures to publicly support Sophia during the early days of the scrutiny. "Catherine, wonderful to see you. You look absolutely stunning, dear. And congratulations on the Atlantic piece. Brilliant work. Thank you. That means a great deal coming from you. Have you given any thought to book proposals? I have several publishers who would be very interested in expanding that corporate accountability theme into a full-length investigation." Before Sophia could respond, they were joined by Marcus Chen, the investigative reporter whose Pulitzer Prize-winning series on political corruption had inspired Sophia to pursue journalism in the first place. "The famous Sophia Reed," Marcus said with a grin. "I have to admit, when the social media frenzy first started, I was skeptical. But that Atlantic piece, outstanding work. You've got sources in places most of us can only dream of reaching." The conversation continued for several more minutes with Catherine and Marcus discussing story ideas, potential collaborations, and the current state of investigative journalism. Sophia found herself relaxing as the discussion moved away from her relationship and focused purely on her professional work. "Excuse me," a sharp voice interrupted. "I couldn't help but overhear." They turned to see a woman in her 50s with perfectly coiffed blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Sophia recognized her immediately. Janet Whitmore, gossip columnist for the New York Post, and one of her harshest critics. "Janet," Catherine said coolly. "How nice to see you, Catherine." "Marcus, so good to see you both." "And Miss Reed, of course. I was just telling my readers how fascinating it is to watch someone leverage a romantic relationship into professional opportunities." The comment landed like a slap. Sophia felt her cheeks burn. But before she could respond, Marcus stepped forward. "Janet, that's an interesting perspective considering Sophia's Atlantic piece was in development long before she met Alexander Sterling. In fact, if you'd done your research, you'd know she was investigating corporate malfeasance while living paycheck to paycheck. Hardly the actions of someone motivated by social climbing." "Of course," Janet replied smoothly, "though one has to wonder about the timing of the publication. So convenient to have such a prestigious platform just when she needed to establish credibility." "The timing," Catherine interjected, "was determined by our editorial calendar and the completion of Sophia's research. The Atlantic doesn't publish pieces as favors to anyone, regardless of who they're dating." Sophia found her voice. "Mrs. Whitmore, I understand your skepticism. The circumstances of my relationship with Alexander are unusual, and I know it's easier to assume the worst about people's motivations. But I'd encourage you to judge me based on my work, not my personal life." "How noble," Janet said with a condescending smile. "Though I can't help but notice that your work has certainly benefited from your access to Sterling Industries' boardroom, hasn't it? Amazing how doors open when you're sleeping with the right person." The accusation hung in the air like poison. Sophia felt her carefully constructed composure beginning to crack. This was exactly what she'd feared, that no matter what she accomplished, there would always be people ready to diminish it by attributing her success to her relationship rather than her abilities. "That's enough." Alexander's voice cut through the tension like a blade. He appeared beside Sophia, his usual easy charm replaced by something much more dangerous. "Janet, I believe you owe Sophia an apology." "Mr. Sterling, how gallant. Though I was simply making an observation about you were implying that my girlfriend traded sexual favors for professional advancement," Alexander said, his voice deadly quiet. "Which is not only offensive, it's demonstrably false. Sophia's investigation began months before we met, involved companies that have no connection to Sterling Industries, and was completed using sources she developed through years of ethical journalism." "Alexander, it's okay," Sophia said quietly, though she was grateful for his defense. "No, it's not okay." Alexander's eyes never left Janet's face. "You want to criticize me? Fine. You want to question my business decisions or my qualifications? Have at it. But Sophia earned her reputation through talent, integrity, and hard work. Anyone who suggests otherwise is either ignorant or malicious. Well, Janet said, clearly flustered by the confrontation. I certainly didn't mean to imply. Yes, you did, Marcus interrupted. Janet, I've known you for 15 years, and you never say anything you don't mean. The question is whether you're going to apologize for a baseless attack on a colleague's professional integrity. The small crowd that had gathered during the confrontation waited in tense silence. Janet looked around, clearly realizing she'd overstepped in front of witnesses who wouldn't hesitate to report her behavior. Of course, perhaps I misspoke. Miss Reed, I apologize if my comments seemed to minimize your professional achievements. It was a grudging apology at best, but Sophia accepted it graciously. Thank you, Mrs. Whitmore. I appreciate that. Janet retreated, but the encounter had shaken Sophia more than she wanted to admit. As the crowd dispersed and conversations resumed, she excused herself to find a quiet corner to collect herself. She found herself in a relatively secluded alcove near the Egyptian wing, trying to process what had just happened. Despite all the positive coverage, despite the success of her Atlantic piece, there were still people who saw her as nothing more than a gold digger who'd gotten lucky. Sophia. Margaret Sterling appeared beside her, looking concerned. I saw what happened with Janet Whitmore. Are you okay? I'm fine, Sophia said automatically, then sighed. No, actually, I'm not fine, Margaret. Does it ever get easier? The constant scrutiny, the assumption that everything I achieve is somehow connected to Alexander's influence. Margaret was quiet for a moment, studying Sophia's face. Can I tell you something about why I really arranged for you to meet Alexander? Sophia looked up surprised. I thought we'd covered that. You saw us interact at the cafe and decided to play matchmaker. That's part of it, but not the whole story. Margaret glanced around to make sure they weren't being overheard. Sophia, I've been watching Alexander struggle with this exact issue for years. Every woman he dated was either after his money or so wealthy herself that the relationship felt like a business merger. He'd started to believe that genuine connection was impossible for someone in his position. And you thought I'd be different because I was broke. I thought you'd be different because of how you reacted when he helped you in the cafe. You thanked him, smiled at him, and walked away. You didn't ask his name, didn't try to extend the interaction, didn't show any interest in who he was or what he could do for you. You treated him like a kind stranger, not a potential opportunity. Sophia considered this. I had no idea who he was exactly. And Sophia, in the 3 months since you've been together, have you ever asked Alexander to use his influence to advance your career? Have you ever leveraged your relationship for professional gain? No, of course not. Of course not. Because despite what Janet Whitmore and others like her want to believe, you have integrity. You've maintained clear boundaries between your personal and professional life, even when it would have been easier to blur them. But people still assume. People assume what they want to assume. Sophia, you can't control other people's opinions. You can only control your own actions. Margaret smiled. And your actions have been exemplary. Before Sophia could respond, Alexander appeared in the alcove. There you are. I was worried when you disappeared. Just needed a moment, Sophia said. That confrontation was more intense than I expected. I'm sorry you had to deal with that. Janet Whitmore has been a toxic presence in New York media for years. Actually, Sophia said, straightening her shoulders, I'm glad it happened because it clarified something important for me. What's that? I've been so focused on proving that I deserve to be with you, that I'm worthy of your family's acceptance, that I belong in your world. But that's the wrong question. Alexander and Margaret both looked puzzled. The right question, Sophia continued, is whether this world, our world, the one we're building together, is worthy of who we are when we're together. And I think it is. She looked around the museum at the priceless art, the elegantly dressed guests, the carefully orchestrated social theater of high society. This is all beautiful, and I'm grateful to be part of it. But what makes it meaningful isn't the luxury or the exclusivity. It's the opportunity to us privileged responsibly, to leverage access for positive change, to be part of something larger than ourselves. Alexander smiled, and Sophia saw pride in his expression. That's exactly what I hoped you'd realize. Mr. Sterling, Miss Reed. A museum staff member appeared at the entrance to the alcove. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but they're about to begin the presentation ceremony. You're needed on stage." Sophia looked confused. "On stage? I'm not part of any presentation." Margaret and Alexander exchanged glances. "Actually," Alexander said, looking slightly nervous. "You are, Sophia. The museum is announcing their new investigative journalism fellowship tonight. It's a program to support journalists working on stories about cultural institutions and their social responsibility." "That's wonderful. But what does it have to do with me?" "You're the inaugural recipient," Margaret said with a grin. "The fellowship comes with a $100,000 stipend, full access to the museum's archives and resources, and a commitment to publish your findings in a major publication." Sophia stared at them. "How is that possible? I never applied for any fellowship, because it didn't exist until last month." Alexander admitted the museum board was so impressed with your Atlantic piece that they created the program specifically to support similar work. "Alexander, please tell me you didn't have anything to do with this." "I swear to you, I had no involvement in the selection process. In fact, I didn't even know about it until they called to verify some background information." The museum staff member cleared his throat politely. "I'm sorry, but they really do need you on stage now." Sophia looked at Alexander, then at Margaret, both of whom were beaming with pride and excitement. "This is really happening." "It's really happening," Alexander confirmed. "And Sophia, it's happening because you earned it. Not because of me, not because of our relationship, but because you're exactly the kind of journalist they want to support." As they made their way back to the main reception area, Sophia felt a surge of confidence she hadn't experienced in months. This was validation from one of the most prestigious cultural institutions in America, recognition of her work that had nothing to do with her romantic life. The presentation ceremony was surreal. Standing on stage in front of hundreds of influential New Yorkers, accepting recognition for professional achievement rather than social status, Sophia felt like she was finally inhabiting the life she'd always wanted but never dared to imagine. "This fellowship represents everything I believe about the power of journalism," she said into the microphone, looking out at the sea of faces. "The responsibility to investigate, to question, to hold even our most cherished institutions accountable to their highest ideals." She caught sight of Alexander in the audience, his face glowing with pride, and felt a rush of love so intense it nearly took her breath away. "I'm honored to be part of this program and excited to begin work on what I hope will be a meaningful contribution to our understanding of cultural institutions in American society." The applause was thunderous. As Sophia left the stage, she was immediately surrounded by congratulations, business cards, interview requests, and collaboration offers. For the first time since her relationship with Alexander became public, the professional attention was entirely separate from the personal interest. "How does it feel?" Rachel Martinez appeared beside her with a satisfied smile. "To be celebrated for your mind rather than your love life. Incredible," Sophia said honestly, "like I can finally breathe." "Good, because this is just the beginning. That fellowship is going to open doors you didn't even know existed. And Sophia, they're doors you'll be walking through because you earned the right to be there." The rest of the evening passed in a blur of networking, celebration, and growing excitement about the fellowship project. By the time she and Alexander finally returned to his penthouse, her apartment had become impractical once the paparazzi discovered her address. Sophia was exhausted but exhilarated. "I'm proud of you," Alexander said as they stood on his terrace overlooking Central Park. "Not just for tonight, but for how you've handled everything these past 3 months. The scrutiny, the criticism, the pressure to become someone else. You've stayed true to yourself through all of it." "It wasn't easy," Sophia admitted. "There were times I wanted to run away from all of it. The attention, the expectations, even from you. What changed?" Sophia considered the question. "I realized that running away would mean giving up the best thing that ever happened to me. And I don't just mean our relationship, though that's certainly part of it. I mean the life we're building together, the opportunities we have to make a real difference." Alexander pulled her closer. "Speaking of the life we're building together." Something in his tone made Sophia look up at him more sharply. "Alexander, I have something for you." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Sophia's heart stopped. Alexander, before you panic, he said quickly, this isn't what you think it is. Or rather, it's not what you think it is yet. He opened the box to reveal not an engagement ring, but a key, old-fashioned, ornate, clearly vintage. It's the key to the house in the Hamptons, the one next to my grandmother's estate. Alexander's nervousness was evident now. I bought it last month, hoping that maybe you'd want to spend summers there with me as a place that's ours. Not mine or yours, but ours. Sophia stared at the key, understanding its significance. This wasn't just about real estate. It was about commitment, about building a shared life, about taking the next step without rushing into marriage before they were both ready. Alexander, it's beautiful, but I can't let you buy me a house. You're not letting me buy you anything. I'm asking you to share something with me. There's a difference. Sophia picked up the key, feeling its weight in her palm. What about my independence, my career? I don't want to become someone who just orbits around your life. That's exactly why I bought the house. It has a separate wing that would be perfect as a writing studio, natural light, library space, complete privacy when you need to work. You could use it as a base for your fellowship research or for the book Catherine mentioned. You were listening to that conversation. I'm always listening when people talk about how brilliant you are. Sophia laughed, feeling some of her tension ease. So, this is what exactly? A commitment ceremony for people too practical for engagement. This is me saying that I love you, that I want to build a life with you, and that I'm confident enough in what we have to invest in our shared future. Alexander paused. And maybe if things continue going well, there might be a different kind of key in a different kind of box sometime in the next year or two. Just a key though for now. Just a key for now. Sophia looked out at the city spread below them, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 6 months ago, she'd been a struggling journalist who couldn't pay her rent. Tonight, she'd been honored by one of the most prestigious institutions in America and offered a key to a shared future with a man she loved desperately. Yes, she said simply. Yes, yes to the house. Yes to the shared life. Yes to building something together that's bigger than either of us could create alone. Alexander's smile could have powered the city below. He swept her into his arms, spinning her around on the terrace as the lights of Manhattan twinkled beneath them. I love you, Sophia Reed, he said when he finally set her down. I love you too, Alexander Sterling. Even if you are completely crazy, crazy enough to believe in accidental perfection, crazy enough to believe in intentional happiness. As they kissed under the stars, Sophia reflected on how much had changed since Margaret's perfect mistake had brought them together. What had started as deception had become the foundation for complete honesty. What had begun as a financial transaction had evolved into emotional investment. What had seemed like an impossible mismatch had revealed itself as perfect complementarity. The accidental bride had become an intentional partner, ready to build a life that honored both her independence and their connection. And if sometimes that life would be lived in the public eye, with all the scrutiny and pressure that entailed, at least it would be lived authentically with integrity and with love. 6 months later, when Alexander did present her with a different kind of box containing a different kind of promise, Sophia's answer would be just as simple and just as certain. Yes to him. Yes to them. Yes to the beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life they were creating together. But that's another story entirely. For now, it was enough to stand on a terrace overlooking the city where they'd found each other, holding the key to their shared future, and knowing that the best accidents sometimes lead to the most intentional choices.